The following data represent the number of potholes on 35 randomly selected 1-mile stretches of highway around a particular city. We're going to complete parts A and B. Now, in part A, we want to construct a frequency histogram of the data, and then we're going to choose the correct answer below. Now, before we construct that frequency histogram, let's go ahead and take a look at each one of these histograms. Now, if you notice here, we're going from 0, and that's here is 1's in the middle. That's the midpoint, which means this starts at 0.5, and therefore this is 1.5. 2 is the midpoint, and then this is 2.5. 3 is the midpoint, and then this is 3.5, and so on. Now, if we look at each individual histogram, they're all starting at 0.5. So that's going to be important for when we actually create it on StatCrunch. Now, we also need to look at what is the width of these bars in the histogram. Well, if you notice, this goes from 0.5 to 1.5, which means that it's a width of 1. Now we're going to use that information to then create our frequency histogram. So let's go ahead and open this up in a StatCrunch. Okay, so now you can see here that this column represents the number of potholes, and here's our data. So we're going to go ahead and go to Graph, and then we're going to select Histogram. Now we're going to select the column, which is the number of potholes. Okay, now the next thing that we want to do is we want to come down and take a look at the type, where we're going to create a frequency histogram, so it's already selected frequency. Now, where are we starting at? Well, remember that we're starting at 0.5. So 0.5, and we know that the width is going to be 1. Okay, we're going to put the values above the bar just so that we can possibly read to make sure that we have the correct choice. Okay, now there could be markers, but we're not going to need to worry about that in this example. Okay, now we're going to come back down here, and now on the graph properties, what we're going to do is we're going to label this. So the x-axis label is going to be the number of potholes. So I already have it in here, number of potholes. And then the y-axis label is the frequency. So we have frequency, so you can type in the word frequency. Now, what is the title of this? Well, the title is potholes. It's important to know how to do this because when you do your project, you want to make sure that you know how to put that information in there. Okay, and now we're going to go ahead and select compute. So now when you select compute, okay, it doesn't put the midpoint, but you're assuming the midpoint here is 1. This is 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then 7. Now we need to find out which graph represents this. Well, if we take a look at A, this goes all the way up to 12, so A could be a possibility. If we look at B, we can see that the number for 1 is very low, so it can't be B, and it also can't be C, and it also can't be D. So when you look at this histogram, you should see that it matches selection A. And there's our result. Okay, now what we want to do is now we want to be able to create a relative frequency histogram of the data. Okay, so all we need to do in this case is, you see the options. We're going to select options, and then we're going to select edit. Now, everything else that we're going to edit is basically the same. So we're going to have everything else start at the same spot. The only thing that we need to change now is the type of distribution that we want to create. In this case, we want to create the relative frequency. So now let's go ahead and select compute. Now remember, everything is already included. We have the x-axis labels. Now, the one thing that we do need to change is the y-axis label, because now we're dealing with the relative frequency. Now let's go ahead and select compute, and now there is our graph. And now we need to take a look and see, okay, which one of these graphs does it look like? Well, if you take a look here, it looks like D represents the graph that we graphed there, which is a histogram. Let's select that choice, and there is our result.